we started it, you know, the idea, and apologies for our little boys crying a little bit. We're women, we know, we're multitasking.
He hears mommy's voice amplified, he can't figure out.
Oh my goodness. I think we should have taken the strategy of putting him all the way at the other end. He's in the close room, but anyway. We're multitasking and we've got all kinds of responsibilities and we're trying to balance everything. And so we oftentimes, just by virtue of the fact that we just don't have time, neglect the informal networking. And, McKinsey did a study that said informal networking, lack of sponsors and lack of mentors are the 3 primary reasons women don't advance. And I don't think it's because we don't know how to network. I don't think it's because we don't know how to get a mentor or a sponsor or be a mentor or sponsor. I think it's because we often have this conflict of time. How do we allocate it? How do we manage to get the most out of it? So my goal was to help create this community so that we can do some of this informal networking and just help each other. And that's really what we're here to talk about tonight in part. This is a little bit of a different format than what we've done in the past. In the past, we've done these big things out in the backyard. I spared you of the cold weather tonight and said we're going to do something inside. But 45 to 50 people is the target. We can't do more than that, and we're just about at 50 people. And so it worked out really well. And the focus for today is a single topic, a single expert. We've got Nancy Duarte, who you guys are going to hear a lot more about in just a few minutes. And we really drilled down on that. And so one of the things that I heard back from you all after the first event was, how do we more effectively communicate? Business communications. Women are different than men. We have different styles, and yet we operate in environments, most of us work in high tech, where it's largely men. And so we need to be able to communicate in a way that's effective, that's memorable, that's compelling, and that puts us in a situation where we can achieve, where we can advance, where we can win. And so Nancy Duarte, my dear friend and an expert in this area, is here today to talk to us about this. She has been in this business for quite some time, and she started her own company. She's going to tell you a little bit more about the inspiration behind starting Duarte Inc. with her husband. But she knows how to communicate. She knows how to tell stories. She knows how to be effective in communication. And I think women, as we're building our brand and as we're trying to advance in companies that are largely male, we need to have some skills in that area. I think a lot of us do. We wouldn't be where we are, but we can always improve. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go about 45 minutes or so. We'll still get you out of here on time. But I want to give Nancy an opportunity to tell a little bit about your inspiration, why you started Duarte Inc. with your husband, and then we'll get into some questions about what you guys do. Yeah. And by the way, before we jump into that, we do have a couple of folks, Maria and Karen, who are going to be roaming with Mike, so I'm going to open it up for questions. So prepare your questions, because I'm going to open it up early for questions. And then we also have hard questions. She's really good at those. And then we've got some books. She's not only a wonderful and professional businesswoman, very successful businesswoman, but she's also an author. And so for the folks that ask the best questions, the hard questions, you will get an autographed copy, signed copy from Nancy of one of her numerous books on this subject. Okay, so that is the background. Nancy, please.
So the secret behind my company, we started in 1988, but my husband started the company, and a lot of people don't realize that. He came home, he bought a little Mac Plus to do his schoolwork on. And I was working on a mainframe at my office, and that was a real computer. So I would come home every day and be like, this is a joke. This personal computing thing is stupid. It's not going anywhere. I have a real job, you're gonna go get a real job. And it was terrible. And so he's like, oh, I have this vision, I have this dream. I think this personal computing thing is really gonna take off. And I was like, that movie Psycho, I was like trying to abort his dream as quickly and efficiently as I could. And he begged me, he's like, oh, just read Macworld magazine, just read it once, please, please. Because he was doing little bits of stuff for Burlingame School District and writing himself into grants for desktop publishing, that's what it was called back then. And so I was fine, look, okay, I'll read the magazine. If I can sell it, you can keep it. If I can't sell it, I'm sending out your resumes still. Because I was sending his resumes
Bring the money in, Daddy,
oh,
come on.
Man, bring that. I was this pregnant too. It was 7 years, got the 7-year itch, big pregnancy, and like what I thought was a failure of a husband trying to do this thing. And so I made 3 phone calls that afternoon to NASA, Tandem, which is now HP, and to Apple, and we won 3 accounts in one afternoon. So then I was very pregnant and joined him. And that's where I stepped in. He was like a dude. I just want to work from home in my underwear, like every guy does. And then it just kind of blew up into something that he didn't want. And I love it. So we still work together, very much in love. We work side by side. Our offices actually connect. And he let me do with it whatever I wanted. So it's interesting how desperately I tried to abort his dream, and it became mine. So you never know what kind of opportunity is there under anything. And the funny story is he schlepped furniture all summer, one full summer, for a company called California Microwave. All summer long, with these big Samoan guys, and they moved furniture all summer, and he saved every penny, and he bought his little Mac Plus that the company was built on. We just moved into the building he moved furniture from, a 35,000 square foot building, yeah. And he says, Nancy, if I'd had an open vision that we were going to have a business here, he goes, I would have just thrown in the towel and just quit right then, because it was just like, yeah. So it's kind of fun how it's all full circle.
It is.
Yeah.
So what's the unique capability that you've developed? Because there are a lot of folks that are doing presentations and business communications, but you guys have something special, and you integrate storytelling.
I would say we were one of the first to actually do presentations years and years ago when we used 35mm slides. There was this company called Jenna Graphics, and they would do it professionally. You hired professional designers to make your slides. And then 1987 PowerPoint came around, and suddenly everyone could make slides, and you didn't have to know how to display information. So you can go get your MBA right now, and you use PowerPoint second only to email, and nobody's ever taught people how to do a visual display of information effectively. So it was 1988 that we started, and what's interesting is in 1992, Apple had a huge layoff, and that was the best thing that ever happened to us, because the price of desktop projectors came down to only $15,000, and then all these people that were great clients at Apple kind of scattered across the valley. And we got niched in presentations. Wasn't what we started in. We got niched in it. Nobody wanted to do it because it was disgusting. It was reviled. It was this disgusting media. All the other agencies in town were like, give it to Nancy. She'll take anything. She has no boundaries to what she'll do for money, I guess. I don't know. I'm a capitalist all the way through, all in my heart. I'm a capitalist. And so we just kept getting thrown all this work. And I remember there was this one guy in large business marketing at Apple, and he was such a visionary, such a creative, and he pushed me in directions we didn't know this medium could go. And that was 1992, and it really shaped us. So then, after doing it for 23 years, I wrote a book in 2008. I was so in the business. I was just working in the business. I hired a president finally, and he took over the business side, so I could kind of, quit looking at the business and working on it. I could look up and look around. And I didn't even know what a blog was. I'd heard of blogs. So I did a find on the word presentation blog. And this guy named Gar Reynolds out of Japan, he owned the space. He had like 25,000 blog followers, and I'm just trying to figure out what a blog is. So he's like, hey, Nancy, he kind of did the research, found out we did Algorithms and Convenient Truth, figured out that we worked with the best brands. He goes, you should have written this book. So I'm going to send you my book, and then I want you to write about everything that I left on the cutting room floor. So my competitor is the one who forced me, and he'd follow up, have you written your book yet? Have you written your book yet?
Really?
Yeah, and so then I wrote my first book, and it completely changed the trajectory of the company, completely changed it. So there's best practices around the visual display of information. John Maeda, who's joining Kleiner Perkins, he loves to give the book away because I use business terms to describe the value of the visual display of information, and that's Slideology. And then I went on a 3-year journey through Story where I'd gotten this review. I'd spoke at a speaking gig, and I would take these low-risk speaking gigs. It was like a 200-person conference in Arizona, right? And I would pick a different chapter of the book, and I would just, it was forced a deadline. I would say all this information, and I got this review back. I thought, wow, that was really valuable information. I get this review back, and it sucked. And the conference guy called me. He goes, well, you're very valuable information, but nobody feels like they know you. Nobody connects to you. You really should tell more personal stories. And I was devastated. devastated. I went home and cried. I was like, wow, I put so much energy in that. Screw you, I didn't, in my heart.
Conference.
Yeah, in my heart I said that, and the very next year I came back and practiced telling stories. But then I went on a 3-year journey through story, and then I made a discovery that, like, my dirty secret is I don't have a college degree. Both Cisco did pay for me to get an MBA from UCLA, right? So I dropped out of college because I got a C- in speech communication, a D in English. Now I write books on speech communication in English, right? I know. My alma mater I flunked out of, they're like hitting me up for money, right? It's kind of fun. They gave me like a little award, Entrepreneur of the Year award last year. Was fun. But it was awesome. It was very moving. So I made this discovery that nobody had ever made, where I felt like greatest speeches had a pattern or a cadence to it that I wanted to figure that out, and I knew it had a storytelling principle in it. So as I really read through story and learned that, and then I figured out all about the kind of the building of tension and release, that builds of tension and release, and it was like a cadence through all of these great speeches. And that's what my book Resonate is about. It's all about storytelling principles that greatest communicators have used over time. And then I use modern day examples too, like Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs
and
is
other
pretty
people.
brilliant at that.
Yeah, really brilliant
I saw
at
your
that.
TED Talk where you talked about and showed some of his speeches and the modulation.
Yeah.
It's like a lyric, it's a song.
It is. It's like a song, and so my son's a very talented musician, so people say, oh, that reminds me of music. So at the very end of Resonate, my son analyzed he analyzed online, you could actually listen to them, because I can't hear classical music, I'm not trained, and so my son took some of the visual principles and he analyzed sonatas using the same principles, so it applies through
That's
music.
amazing.
Yeah, it's just beautiful, and he and I really had a beautiful time, him teaching me how to hear music. So if you're not good at that, you can go online and listen, you can see the contrast in these beautiful sonatas. So that was fun. It was a mommy moment.
So, yeah, I love that. And he is amazing. He did just a little bitty piece for us. We were at Nancy's house, and we were just floored. He is a brilliant pianist and musician, just amazing. So you should be very proud. I love him. Okay, so storytelling. So, it started desktop publishing, business communication, storytelling, even interwoven throughout. What's the story that motivates you? And how would you tell it?
My stories are kind of tragic. They're all like cautionary tales, like, don't be dumb like me. I think that my story for years, and I've found that, I don't know what's wrong with your chairs.
Oh, no, they're kind of rickety.
I'm going to gift you some extra cash.
We do take donations.
Excellent, you caught that. My problem, kind of, and I found out that a lot of powerful women have kind of mom issues. So all growing up, I knew, like, I'm not going to beat my children for no reason like mom does. I'm not going to, be the way she is, So I was raised in a home where both my folks were alcoholics. They were sober alcoholics, but my mom was what was called a dry drunk. So even though she was dry, she treated us and the children in a way that was abusive. And so I feel like I was always running from my mom. At the same time, all I ever wanted to hear from her was, I'm proud of you. Yeah. So it became this driving thing. Oh, if I do this, I'll hear those words. From my mom, I've always longed to hear, oh, I'll do this, and I'll hear those words I've longed to hear. So we grew to about 30-some people, and she'd never been to my office. My poor son was born emergency cesarean. She didn't have time to pop by and see me, even though she doesn't have a job or anything. So she finally comes by the office, and she's like, well, if you're going to run around pretending you're some sort of executive, you should at least figure out how to wear a hose with your outfit. Like, that was her way of being like, congratulations, honey, you've arrived, right? And I thought, wait a minute, I've been married as long as I lived with her. Why am I letting her be the one who drives how I feel about myself, right? And I'll never forget, we had this moment of reckoning. She lives in the South. She's a relatively large lady, and you get kind of sweaty in the South because it's very hot. And I was visiting one day, and my mom had left when I was 16. It's one of the reasons I didn't finish college. We came home from church. There's a note on the kitchen table that says, pick up the car at the Jackson Airport. I've moved to California. So I wound up raising my siblings. I didn't have anyone. Like, I was doing wash, doing this. My little sister never knew. She goes, I knew that stuff was magically appearing. I didn't know it was you, And so she left. And so I think that's why I felt like, well, if I was a better kid, I could have done better, and Mommy would have stayed. You know, you go through these things. And so I was visiting once in Mississippi, and she just had this moment of clarity right before she went into dementia, where she pulled me on her lap, and she said, I want you to forgive me for abandoning you. And at that point, it was my story to decide if I truly forgave her, I wouldn't let this be what drives me anymore. I would find meaning in other places.
Yes.
I would find a reason for being.
Yes.
It wasn't intertwined with meeting a desperate need for my mom's affection. So I don't have her affection anymore, but in that moment of clarity of her asking me to forgive her for leaving me, I had to forgive her. And so now that doesn't define me anymore. So this is a woman who gets about 6 Amazon boxes a day, and she reads probably 100 books a year, and she's never opened mine. Because this is so sad, in Resonate, in the intro, my president of my company calls me a thought leader. So in the intro, it lost credibility because her daughter's not a thought leader, so she didn't ever read it. So those things, though, paint a picture for who she is today, but that didn't even hurt. Like, it was weird. You'd think like, oh, poor Nancy, did you cry your eyes out? It's like, no, I didn't,
really.
because I didn't need her affirmation anymore, and that actually was the moment I knew I was actually restored. So in reality, a lot of what drove me in my early years was what I was running from, and now I spend my life trying to run to instead of running from.
I love that story. Who can relate to that?
Who has mommy
In some way,
issues?
shape.
Anyone?
Anybody have mommy, daddy issues, sister, cousin, crazy neighbor issues? Yeah. We got all those issues. Crazy boss issues too.
Crazy boss
Sorry,
issues.
I shouldn't say that. It's some Intel capital.
You have
people
Intel
here.
people here.
No, Arvin's good. He's all right. Okay. So inspiration. We all have inspiration, right? There's something that moves and motivates and inspires all of us, which is why we get up and do what we do every day. So it's good to hear your story and get that side of it. One of the things that I heard, and after the first session, we asked for feedback from everyone, is how do you take all that energy, the passion, that fuels you, your personal experience, and how do you effectively use it in a work context? And especially here in Silicon Valley, where, we all know it's largely male, and women, though we're around, we're generally not, I don't think, fully appreciated. I think oftentimes our comments are set aside or are not given as much authority at times. And so we need to figure out, how do we communicate with authority? How do we use our know-how, our mother wit, our experience, our perspective to be effective business people and to communicate more effectively? What's your advice on how we do that?
I moved down here when I was 25, and by the time I was 28, I was telling CEOs what to say.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it has to do with your own personal sense of authority. And someone told me that once, like, oh, Nancy, you have the strongest sense of personal authority of anyone I've ever met. I'm like, oh, is that good? Is that bad?
Do you hate me?
Do you hate me? Is it because I boss you around a lot? What is it? And I think that that sense of this is mine and I deserve it and I own it is important. The thing about women is we come across as shrill when we're commanding. And I think that, like, not backing down. So the toughest thing I went through was there was this company that was formed. It was an IBM, HP, Apple triumvirate. It was called Taligent. And the guy who was the CEO was an ex-IBM guy. I mean, he was, blue suit, white shirt, the whole, like, bing, bang. He called slides foils. That's how you know they worked at IBM.
That's how you know they're IBM or
They're
Intel.
called foils.
Yes, we do foils too.
I know. They're foils. And so the whole bit, man, and I'd heard, oh, yeah, Joe, he's gone through 4 slide ladies already, and I was like, that's all you have
You're
to do.
slide lady number 5?
Lady. I was the 5th. And I was like, that's all you have to tell me. I just become competitive. So when you go through stuff like what I went through, you either let it destroy you or you taste blood and you just, like, keep going, right? I'm like, I'm going to be his girl, right? And man, it was a tango. It was intense, and it was like lots of yelling and screaming at me because I'm a failure, kind of a thing, and I'd done nothing wrong. It got to where we would tape him in meetings and play his tape back, and we're like, well, the reason we came back with this is because in the last meeting you said, we'd play it back for him. Oh, he would go ballistic, right? But man, I came with every angle, every punch, and everything, and he just adored me. I mean, it took about 3 meetings. And he was just like, wow, you're tenacious. And I fought for what I was right, told him what to say. And, you know, he would chew me out. I'd let him chew me out, you know, every blue moon. But, you know, if I didn't deserve it, I would fight right back. And I think that's what kind of put me in the saddle. And man, I got toughened up from that IBM guy. I didn't take it. I don't know why. Normally we would be like, oh my God, he yelled at me. You know, I remember this one time somehow, this was when we rendered 35 millimeter slides, the IBM logo, you know, is stripes, and the edges of them just pinched of every stripe. Oh my God. It wasn't my fault really, it was the people who rendered it out and put it in, because I was like, my file is right, and it rendered wrong, my file is right, it rendered wrong. I'm defending myself. He goes, it looks like shit. Because that's not the way the IBM logo looks, and you screwed up, right? You know, and it was just like, wow, it was good. It was painfully awesome.
It was good.
Yeah, because then I felt like I could walk into any seat. I mean, if I could make it and be his faithful, loyal, however long Intelligent was, 3-4 years, however long it was around, I was his slide lady. And I was the first person he called, and we would sit in a room and visualize things, and I'd sketch them out. We'd we'd put it all up on the wall, we'd range it and rearrange it. I'd sketch out concepts, run back to the office, and send
Do
it
you
back
think
to him.
during that process that you gained credibility? Because I think, you know,
I gained confidence. So I gained credibility with him.
Okay.
And then his guy went off and started VeriSign, and then then they all took me with them.
Okay.
So for me, it was, I think a lot of my own self-worth was not letting him destroy me. Like it was like, I'm not going to let him do it to me, and I'm going to come back every time. Not fighting like, bash you in the face, but like
maybe a little of that.
A little. I do have one funny story. Like we were there working really late, and it was like, I don't know, I got disoriented, and I went to use the men's bathroom, and I'm sitting there, like sitting in the stall in the men's bathroom, and I could.
You didn't notice?
Well, no. I was exhausted. He would warn me. I could see men's shoes, and I could see them. If you looked at it, I saw men's shoes with the little cuffs, you know, go walking back and forth. Oh my God, I'm working too hard.
I'm working way too hard.
Yeah, and then he left, whoever this mystery guy was. Yeah, that's how hard I was working to make this man happy.
You know, and I think, I mean, maybe that's really hard. I'm impressed.
I was working hard.
Women, there's this fine line between how aggressive should I be without being too offensive? How much should I stand up for my ideas and my point of view without being viewed as, you know, the B word or something worse than that? What's the balance?
I've been the outside consultant. So fortunately for me, you're always listened to as the outside consultant. You have more of a voice than an internal female would as the external consultant. And then fortunately, I got to build my own culture where women are not oppressed. They have a voice. But that said, I've built this culture for females, nurture them, raise them up, whatever they need or want. Then we read Sheryl Sandberg's book. I do a big book club. I say, who wants the book? More men ask for the book than women. I bought it for everyone. We do a book club. We're all sitting around, 20, probably 2 women, 3 men, 22 women, 3 men, right? And it's just this amazing conversation. I say, my big revelation from Cheryl's book is I spend a lot of time with external women and not nearly as many on my own staff. Yeah. So I say, I really want to mentor as many of you as want to. Nobody. So then I announced it at staff meeting.
Nobody.
Hey,
Did you hear that? Nobody.
No women. So I announced it at staff meeting, and I'm like, hey, you know, I read this book, my big revelation. I want to spend more time mentoring my own team. I'd love as many women as want to, blah, blah, blah. I'll spend as much time. We'll set up weekly, however often you want. I'll remove my travel schedule, whatever. No women. My IT help desk guy was like, I want to be mentored. I was like, okay. So then another guy overheard him. We were talking about our next mentorship. He's like, can I be mentored? 2 guys, no women. And so I'm actually reached out to my high-performing women, and they were like, well, you know, you're so busy, and we just want to be conscientious of your schedule. And, you know, it's like, no, my God, I canceled my schedule, and I want to spend time with you. And it's very interesting. So I don't know what it really is, except that women are more concerned about the collective whole than we are about our own ambition most of the time. And I think that if the collective isn't moving in the same direction, we'll make personal sacrifice to make sure the collective is moving instead of our own personal gain. And I don't know why women are bossy and men are authoritative or whatever.
Right. What is that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
We do get shrill a little bit sometimes.
Maybe a little catty sometimes. Are there questions in the audience? I have other questions, but there's a couple in the back.
Hi, my name is Jessie. Thanks so much, Nancy. My question is really around authenticity and a bit of what we're discussing right now. I work with a lot of different startups, and I find on the storytelling or the pitching side that men tend to feel very confident in pitching an idea or startup proposition that, and even if it doesn't exist, they'll come up and say, you know, we're changing the world or we're killing it. And I see these women who have really done something powerful or impactful. What do you want to say? They've done something powerful or impactful, and they sort of defer. They're like, well, we're still testing this out, or we're still figuring out what approach we're going to take. So I wonder if you have any advice on how women can really sort of express that they're killing it.
Yeah, a guy can, man. I mean, he's like 20% qualified the job, and he thinks he's overqualified. A woman could have 80% of the qualifications,
exactly,
and she's not sure if she's quite ready for it.
Yeah.
What is that? So
I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert in that by any means.
We can all do it.
Yeah, I don't know why we're that way. I don't think the world makes a way for men anymore. I think your generation, you seem so young. We were talking to the young Stanford gals here, and they're there, saying how they're treated as peers and equal. And I think that as we learn to function that way and have a mindset that what I'm doing is great work and I believe in it. And I think if you're not doing something that's great and that you believe in, you're not going to represent it with the same kind of conviction as if you were doing something. So my thing is I do think women are more honest, we are more transparent, and we will point out all the red flags that are going on, right? Whereas the guys will only wave the victory flag. And I just think it's a perspective thing and how we paint the picture. So one of the things that I'm working on is how do we describe the future poetically? Like you visualize the future and you describe it with words that are so magnificent and so amazing that this future state is so alluring, right? And that's what we need to learn to do is talk about our work. And everyone in this room can craft words and craft words in a way that are so beautiful that you create desire in venture capitalists, right? So we may not be able to do it from our pompousness, but we should be able to be clever. I would say, we are more, I think in some ways we have had to be more clever. You guys wouldn't be sitting in this room if there weren't circumstances that made it to where you had to be the most clever person in the room. So I think if we use our wit and our charm until it's more equal balanced, it's about all we can do.
That's a great question. Well, more questions.
Did I answer that one wrong?
Good question.
Hi. So I'm Madhu Varma from Intel. So I just wanted to comment on what Lisa said and what you're discussing right now regarding, men, if they know only 20%, they think they're so good, and women know 80% and they don't. But is it really the person thinking that way, or it's the people who are judging them? If it's a man, if he knows 20%, they only focus on his strengths. Whereas if it's a woman, they will focus on the 20% she may not know. So I don't know if it's, for example, I can only talk for myself, that I don't think I see myself as in that category, but maybe the other person sees that way. So is it changing the...
Yeah, I feel bad. I don't know that I'm qualified. I haven't had to work in the political situations that you guys have had to work. In fact, I used to feel like, as an entrepreneur, I don't want to hang out with women. I never hung out with women, never did anything, never went to all these chick events, never did anything. Because I was like, I want people to buy from me because I'm the best, not because I had to lean on my sisters or whatever, right? I had this total, almost this really not a good attitude, and it probably was because of my mother issues, really, right?
Yeah.
So then I went on this amazing trip with 10 other executives from the Silicon Valley, female executives, and I realized, oh my gosh, there are people who think like me and want to do the best work possible and want to do these things. So I've never been in a political situation at all, and maybe that's what's made me more fearless, because I think if I was beat down every day, making me feel like I wasn't as good as the guy next to me, I have never been in that situation, so I can't even talk to it.
But I think your point about cleverness, though, in that situation where you feel like there may be a bias,
funny.
Right? Be clever, be funny, be endearing. Be something that is memorable. And
not a victim ever.
Yes.
Ever.
Yeah, that's good.
Ever, don't ever be a victim.
Yes, Tina, and then you had a question back there as well.
So do you coach women and men to present differently?
That's an interesting question. I did this, no, not necessarily. It depends on the situation. So, like, when I first moved to the Valley, first thing I did is, we had no money. I came from a career at, like, Long's Drugs or something in Chico, California. First thing I did is go out and buy a bunch of suits at Goodwill, because I wanted to dress for the job I wanted. So I went and got a ton of suits and did this whole power thing, right? Trying to be women. It's interesting, and kind of to your point, we try to hide our feminine side and our emotions. So when people used to ask me, who's the most powerful female communicator over time? Who's our Dr. King? And women tend to not let their emotions show. They tend to feel like, I cannot be affectionate at work, yet that is our strength. It's what we bring. So search, and I came across Evita Perón. Now, she was the wife of the president in Argentina. And sadly, 2 men wrote a play and a musical about her and portrayed her as a slut. And in reality, what people don't know about Evita Perón, because none of her speeches had been translated to English online, which is crazy to me, is she brought women's suffrage. She started a massive foundation. She brought more people out of poverty. She built entire neighborhoods for the poor. She brought industry. She was the first woman ever to campaign on behalf of her husband, blah, blah. So you look at her speeches, right? 2 million people came out for her speeches, and it's not even listed as Wikipedia as one of the largest gatherings ever in the world, yet it was, right? So she's this hidden thing because pop culture paints her as a slut. And so what she did that was different, and now this is 1947, so you gotta realize that women weren't ever given a microphone back then. And what she did is she spoke to her followers with affection, like I've never seen anything like, oh, El Descamasados, that was the name of her followers, because they were so poor they didn't have shirts on their back. And so the rich people called them, oh, Perón's followers are like the shirtless, they have no shirt for their back, they're so poor. It was like this term of revile, to the point where don't ever play the victim, right? So here's this name that had been labeled on their entire platform of the shirtless ones. And she took this term that she could be like, I'm a victim, oh my God, they're calling me and my followers shirtless because we're so poor, because she came from poverty. She took that term, lifted it up, and turned it into a term of redemption, actually. She would say, oh, El Descamasados, you who are more enlightened because you have no pillow for your head and you get to sleep under your stars, you're so enlightened you know to vote for Perón, right? So she would take these terms and she would say, right? And she would say,
you feel good to be poor, that's clever.
And she would say, I press you on my heart. So she would let her actual affection show openly, like
and
her
genuine,
open,
right?
Genuine affection for 2 million people. So at this speech where she sings Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, 2 million people of her followers came out. Something happened that's never happened in spoken word history before. She's talking to them, she finishes her speech, done, 10 minutes. The audience starts to throb. Evita con Perón. They want her to run for the freaking vice presidency. She doesn't even have her name in the candidacy. But they start pulsing, Evita con Perón. And they chant all together. She's like, no, mi compadres, I'm not running for the vice presidency. And then they start to chant, lash at the elite, meaning like, let's tear down the wealthy so that the poor can rise up, right? No, you know, she has a conversation with 2 million people. It's never happened before. But she keeps trying to, in a very affectionate way, she's turning them down. I live for Perón, you know, without him I would be nothing. She converses with them, and then she's so exhausted, she collapses in her husband's arms, and she says, they won't accept that I don't want to run for the vice presidency. So how can we as women, 1947, women aren't even given a microphone back then. Right. Her affection for her followers was so self-evident and so palpable. She wasn't afraid to let it show, that 2 million people came out to hear her speak. And I think that that's okay to let our heart show at work, but we try to be these feelingless people. And I don't mean heart at work, meaning weep all day. I mean like show your affection, like tell your people, like tell them that they're doing a great job, and I hug people and I try to make them feel like we're bound together from bonds deeper than just employment kind of things. And I think that that's where females can be different communicators. So I go way more raw. Like I don't just start off saying, oh, my mommy story is shaping me. I don't do that in a group of men, right? So I do shape what I say. I get way more analytical. I get a little bit more into data. I would maybe show a lot of my research, because you have to build credibility with men. Whereas women, we can just start to communicate emotionally right away. So there is it depends. So every time before I speak, I ask the mix of male to female, and then I turn one off and the other on, depending on who's in the audience.
Good. That's very good. Good question. Thank you.
So my question was going to be very much what you answered, Nancy, but I wanted to make sure I got it in so I can get my book.
It's got to be a good one. This is not a given here.
I'm setting out expectations. So I have to say that the first time probably last year when I saw your TED Talk and the book, I do executive coaching for EY, and I totally stole all your stuff. I love it. I love the dissecting the story. And my question was going to be in line with what you just answered, because what I noticed in introducing storytelling or compelling storytelling as a leadership development tool, the men, especially when we go up on a panel, they're all raw and telling their emotions. They get teary-eyed, and for EY, that's really a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And then the women, it's almost like we have to give them permission to be able to, and I understand where that's coming from, because for many, showing a little bit too much emotion, or in my case, too much passion and using the hand a little bit, is seen as overly dramatic, or the telenovela, kind of effect. So I wonder if you had some, and you share that perspective, but even as you prep or talk to women on presentation, is there something to help alleviate or give that okay for emotion to show up?
Question. This makes me sad in a way, right? Like,
Yeah.
how can I communicate in a way that's credible and yet passionate? I don't know that any dude would ask that question. Like, that's just, I think, a real symptom that there's a really big problem. So I'm definitely not a gender expert by any means, but I feel like I am more male than female. I do feel that way. I feel I'm more male than female in my attributes, in how I communicate, when I communicate. I tend to, at cocktail parties, I prefer the male conversation over the female ones, to be honest with you, because it's like the dudes are talking about how to make the world a better place and how to innovate, and the girls are saying, oh, did you go to Nordstrom's, did you see the shoe size, or whatever, right? And it's just like, wow, I'm not into shopping, so I want to, And so I do think I'm more drawn to male things in a way. And I've never hated my feminine side. I mean, I just now, I'd say in the last 2 years, I'm wearing dresses instead of suits and trying to do things that let that part of me show. But I wouldn't say I'm an expert at that. I just show up every day and try to be true to me, just because it doesn't match anyone else around me. I'm held accountable when I go to bed every night saying my prayers, that I do right by me for how I was made. Because we're all different. We all have unique thumbprints. We all have unique irises. We're so unique. And yet we're all trying to conform to this weird system.
Yeah.
And if I'm in a system where I can't be me, I would get out of the system. I just couldn't live with myself every day if I didn't leave the unique mark on the planet that I was made to make. So
That's great.
it just depends, right?
Love that. Yes, we had two in the front. Oh, one in the back, sorry. Yes, Sarah.
Hi. I've just been asked to give my first big public talk, so I'm totally nervous because I'm just diving in. It's at South by Southwest.
Oh,
which is
congratulations.
No baby steps. I'm just really
It's in the deep
It took
end.
me 6 years to get into South by Southwest, so congratulations.
So I went to the library and I looked at your book and I saw that you recommend beginning with a personal anecdote. So what happens if your talk is on something where you don't really have direct experience? Should you try to find something that's sort of peripherally related that can help people relate to you, even if it's not directly related to the talk? Or what should you do in that situation?
I don't buy into the start every talk with a personal anecdote. I don't remember. Maybe I said that, but maybe I didn't. But to quote myself, what the first thing you have to do is build your credibility, because like right when you're walking on stage, I don't know why we're like this, but you're judging. Wow, I wouldn't have worn that outfit. Like they're thinking all kinds of terrible things, and they're tweeting it, especially at South by Southwest. They're tweeting everything they're thinking about you. They don't just think it, they tweet it. So you need, don't.
It's going to go great, Sarah. It'll be okay.
Hundreds of thousands of people are going to see how they feel about you. So what you have to do, though, is in the first bit, you have to build your credibility. So if you're like, oh, let me tell you about the long elevator ride, ha ha ha, that's like that's dorky. So if your topic is highly analytical, they're coming to hear something heavily analytical, So there's a story of a guy that we worked with at Stanford, I think it's in Resonate, where he had 15 minutes to pitch to a bunch of scientists to win a $2 million grant, right? So he knew he wanted to win it really, really bad. So he came to us and was like, how do I structure this? So we structured this amazing arc, put a little thin veneer of personal anecdote, wove it in, 15 minutes. So most of the other scientists were like, just relaying the science. His was not the best idea, and he'll say it was not the best idea, but he had this human layer on top of it, and they gave him the money, right? So you gotta be genuine. And if there's a story that's like, a lot of times there's an origin story, or why I got into this story, or something, why I love this topic, or there's things you can tell that are related to it that work. You don't have to necessarily kick off with that because it can seem contrived. So one of the patterns that I found that I talked about was you establish what is, right? Here's what is, here's the current state. And when you're establishing what is, you're building credibility because everyone's like, yeah, that is what is. Yeah, she's right. That is where big data is, or whatever, right? Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is the problem with big data. And then you introduce what could be. And that's like the inciting incident in a story. It's like, oh, you know, here's what is. And they're all like, oh, yeah, oh, she's smart. She knows what's going on. And then you introduce, here's what could be. And they're like, whoa, mind blown, right? And then they're like, oh, and then you keep moving back and forth structurally between what is and what could be. And then suddenly, like, what currently is less appealing when it's contrasted with what could be. And the what could be is kind of where your idea exists, assuming you're having to push them along toward buying into your idea. So there's other ways to solve it than, like, you know, a Jew, a rabbi, and whatever walked in a bar. Like, you don't want to say that,
you don't
right?
Go there,
you don't
no.
want to go there.
Yeah.
So there's other ways to dissipate that. And to get over the fear, my favorite advice is a friend of mine, Nick Morgan, and he says that what happens is you do a fight or flight instinct. You get really nervous because you feel like you're walking into a threatening environment. One of the reasons it's threatening is you don't feel like you're walking into a room with your best friends. So if you felt like I was walking in a room to have a conversation with best friends, you wouldn't be nervous. So what he says is that when you're backstage or wherever, right before you walk on, you need to think of someone who you haven't seen for a long time that you love very dearly, and pretend that when you turn around the corner and walk on, you're going to see that person. What it does is the chemistry in your body, like while I was reading it, I was like, oh, all of a sudden I started to melt, I started to warm up, you know. So you force the chemicals in your body to feel like it's not going into a threatening environment, and that's how you calm yourself down.
And then what happens if somebody just gets carried away and asks this really kind of dickish question?
She said dick.
She did say dick. And then we just repeated it. You get that.
Speaking of
creative
dicks,
question.
I do have a funny story about it.
You have a fourth story about, okay.
I do, it's a good one. Okay, I have to tell. So you know you're a working mom and you always feel so guilty about being a working mom. I go to my son's, open house thing, right, kindergarten, and all his artwork's out. So you're flipping through, and I just burst into tears. I start to cry. Because there's a family portrait. There's Mark, me, Rachel, my daughter, and my son in kindergarten. We all have dicks. We all have, or whatever you want to call them, packages. And I'm like, oh my God, my son, oh my God. But mine was like hit the floor. Everyone else's was all tight up in there. But mine was like longer than my feet. So it just shows you. But I do have a tip that actually answers your question. So, that was awesome. You just wait. So what you do, like that'll happen. So what we do, I saved it. You want me to put it in your newsletter?
I'm blogging that for sure.
Is you have to prepare for everything. So one of the exercises we try to do is we try to think of every way someone might resist. And it's really good, especially if you're nervous, to think through everything, every kind of oddball question, everything, and then you're prepared for it. And when it comes, you're just like, oh yeah, blah, 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 right? But what you do physically with your body is he asks some D question, right? Capital D. And then you address it, but then you never look at him again. You start to answer it looking this way, blah, 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 and then you say, can I get a question here? Because he'll try to taunt or provoke you. So answer the question, hear the answer, and then just turn and don't even acknowledge he's in the room, and make sure you latch on to someone else to ask the next question. Oh, there you are. And then you take the question, and then you don't even look at him while you're answering. You look at someone completely different, and you just answer it, and then kind of nod to this area and say, is there a question over here? So you don't get sucked into his vile, capital D-ness. But I think that you've got to be prepared for every single one of those types of things. And the best way is to get a whole bunch of friends, even if it's over cocktails and you're dying laughing at how ridiculous the questions are. Because they'll be in the room sometimes, especially if your topic is kind of charged. If it's emotionally charged,
you're going to enjoy that, Sarah.
It's going to be a good one. So it's going to be pretty charged. Yeah.
Get a couple more questions. Yeah. So Iris and back. Yes. Who is? Yep. Kristen.
So one of the challenges we face every day is having to assert our ideas and our goals. Can you give us some suggestions, not just communicating from a big platform, but on an everyday basis? How do we really bring that story home and think about it when we're in meetings and in interactions?
Yeah. So I think, this is not my own work, but story really does work. And so this pattern that's in Resonate, I think we gave them all away, but there is this pattern, a distinct pattern you use. I use it to get my husband to do errands on the weekend. Like, it's a persuasive story pattern where it builds tension and releases it, and it just kind of works. So I actually kind of speak in that form. I never realized it, but now I just have adopted it. And you can't really manipulate people. I don't want to say you can use it to manipulate, but it is definitely a structure that works to persuade. So even though you say, oh, I don't have a platform, I think everybody has a lot more influence than we let ourselves believe, right? And so I think every time we interact with someone, it's an opportunity to persuade and to influence them. And the words that come out of our mouths, if we could shape them the right way, will become everything we dream. Like, we're the only limiters. We're the ones who limit who we become. And I think that it's a lot about how we frame things. Dudes are better at framing, I think. They can frame this terribly negative thing. They reframe it as this glorious opportunity. They just naturally shift every situation. And I think that we all could be better at reframing things in ways that motivates people. That's a big trick.
2 more questions. Just 2 more questions. Yes, 1, and then we're going to wrap up. We got like 8 questions. I'm sorry. You guys can grab her after. Yes.
I'm curious about how you recruit for your company. And the reason I ask that is because I'd like to recruit people who are really good storytellers for my team. And I wonder if there's specific things that I could look for as opposed to just based on gut instinct that, oh yeah, that person tells a good story. And also in terms of coaching, what are the types of things that I could do to help coach people to be better storytellers?
We have a pretty strong filter. Like, it's hard to get into our organization. We're kind of picky. But for the writers, we actually test them. So we have writers, and then we have designers, and they have to kind of work together as a cooperative. So for the designers, we actually give them a design test. We give them a real script, and we ask them to do a couple keyframes for that. But for the writers, we actually give them a terrible script, something the client handed off to us, and ask them to rewrite it in the form of a story. It's actually a Whole Foods example we use. And so it's a subject matter everyone knows enough about food, right, where they can't say, oh, it was for routers or something like that. And then the team gets together and discusses it. And then if they're brought in, they make it past. The first thing they have to do is present what they did. Because I have to have them not just be story writers, they have to be storytellers. They have to be able to stand up and represent their own work in front of powerful, intimidating people. So they have to be both. So we can tell by the cover letter most of the time that they get it, most of the time. So if they didn't put enough thought and cleverness and creativity into that, we wouldn't need or want them. So the type of people that tend to work really well for us are more like, almost like anthropologists, in the sense that they went through college not knowing what they wanted to be when they grow up. So maybe they start with a political science major, and then they may change to somehow, then they're next thing in science, and they're here and they're there and they're there, and they went to college for 7 years and never got a degree because they had so many interests in so many things. And those tend to actually work really well for us because they can They're like, oh, I know a metaphor that worked for you. That'd be Genghis Khan. And you're like, you're right. Genghis Khan would work for this as a metaphor, right? But you're like, I would never have pulled on that as an analogy, right? So they tend to be a little more clever and witty that way.
Good, good. Yes, you.
So I'd like to go back to that bit of tension and release, and you said you use it on your husband to run errands. I want to hear the example.
I think a lot of people are going to get one-on-ones.
Because I'm like tension
topic.
release, and I was waiting for the example, so I'm very curious.
Ooh. So it's actually just a pattern of communicating where I'll have to make this list of, hey, you know, things are looking kind of messy around. Like, dude, I don't know, like my husband could like be laying on the couch. Like I would come home from work. This is when he was building his business, when I was trying to hatchet it to death. He'd be laying on the couch and it'd be 8 o'clock at night. I'm just stumbling home. He will have been home all day and my daughter will be a mess and there'd be dirty socks all over the place. And he'll be like, hey honey, what's for dinner? And you're like, are you kidding me? How can you even live in this environment? It looks like a pigsty or whatever. And he's like, oh, wow, I didn't even notice. Like I didn't, right? They just don't notice. They'd rather live in the moment than notice or whatever. So that's part of my problem, is getting him to see, oh, you did not know there were piles of moldy dishes or whatever, you know. So I have to say, hey, here's the situation. And look, it could be like this. You know, do I offer sex for favors? Not often, but that also works. No.
If you're married.
So it is a pattern between, hey, here's what's currently going on, but here's what I really need. So what we've figured out is I don't ask for help. It's taken a long time. I will do everything in my home. I will work with the gardeners. I will, you know, manage the cleaning lady. I'll do almost everything, and I don't really ask him to help unless unless I have no more time, no more patience, whatever. I have to be pretty much at my wit's end before I'll ask him to, come on, please do something. So I have to remind him, hey, remember how we talked and how I don't really ask much of you ever, you know, without the snotty rolling.
No, without the rolling eyes.
And I don't really ask for much. So the fact that I'm asking for this means I'm pretty much that I have no more bandwidth, and I don't run out of capacity very often. You know that, you know, that kind of thing. And so now I'm at the end of my own capacity and I need some help, kind of a thing. So that's what is. Here's what's going on. Here's who I am. You know I am this because we've been married for 32 glorious years. And then here's what I need from you and how much my life will be happy if you do this for me. So that's what is, what could be.
Oh, doesn't that sound lovely? Yeah. It never works out that way when you're talking to the husband, does it? For me, anyway. I just want to get to it. Like, how do they do that? We have one more book, so we have one more question. Iris.
I wanted to get your perspective on how do you think about, you know, building your business and also building your family, and both kind of short term while you were in the moment, probably when your kids were younger, versus longer term looking back now?
Yeah, you know what's interesting, my husband and I are 180 degrees different. We did life mission statements, and the guy we hired to do that said, well, the most important part of a life mission statement is the verb. So my verb is to conquer and to liberate. I love setting people free. My husband's verb is to relax. Yeah. So,
is that a verb?
there are activities associated with it.
I guess.
So, like when we're building the business, tackling vacation, everything that kind of manifested. So we had to learn to get over our differences. So as we were building the business, my husband, the thing about some guy who has verb as his relax, he's this deep well of wisdom. He's a real support. Like he's my, you know, well of water when I need refreshing and all those things. Well, he wouldn't be there. So when we were first married, I was like henpecking him. Like, you got to have more passion. You need to get a job that's more powerful. You need, you know. And then I realized if I let him just be him, I'm constantly living and my mind is constantly in the future. Okay, where do I need to be? How do I need to make this move so my employees all can make their car payments, and I need to make this move, and I need to make 2 jumps ahead of my competitor. I'm constantly obsessing about the future. My husband is 100% fully present. He's 100% in the present. So to understand that gap and value it, so he was the one that picked up the kids for the sporting events. He didn't do that great of a job at the doctor. The guys never ask the right questions when they take the kids to the doctor. I'm like, what did the doctor say? But that's what I think made our kids turn out to be so beautiful, is because my husband was fully present and he lets me obsess about the future. We have this little metaphor where I'm the sputtering steam, you know, engine above the surface, and he's the rudder underneath that just makes sure I don't get aground, but I'm hydrated, I'm rested. He's a really nice guy.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what happened. And so he gave me a lot of rope to build the business. So he's good because he knows me well enough. He gave me a ton of rope, and sometimes he watches me run around, right? He's kind of this, and I've got this big old rope, right? I'm running around with my rope. Oops, I fall off the edge of the cliff with my rope, right? And he's not the kind of guy that's going to come out and pull me out. He knows that I have to struggle in rescuing myself, or I won't learn. I'll keep jumping off if he keeps rescuing me, kind of thing. So metaphorically, he gives me a lot of time to learn life's lessons myself, instead of trying to protect me or be a white knight and rescue me and all that kind of stereotypical stuff, because he lets me make some really glorious mistakes, and then I don't do them again.
Only if they're glorious.
Yeah.
Isn't she wonderful?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I said the D word.
Thank you so much.